In 1979, Japanese officials released 30 mongooses onto Amami-Oshima to kill the habu pit viper, a snake responsible for thousands of bites and dozens of deaths. No environmental assessment was ever conducted, and no one caught the one detail that would doom the entire plan. The mongooses hunted by day. The habu struck by night. They almost never met. 25 years later, those 30 had become 10,000, and they were not killing snakes. They were decimating some of the rarest creatures on Earth. The story of how it unraveled starts with what made the island desperate enough to try. On Amami-Oshima, daily life was measured by the silent threat coiled in the undergrowth. The habu pit viper, Protobothrops flavoviridis, struck without warning. Children learned to scan the ground before every step. Farmers wore rubber boots even in the sweltering heat. At dusk, lanterns flickered in clinic windows, the only defense for those who failed to avoid the snake's fangs. Between 1954 and 1998, official records counted more than 2,800 habu bites on the island. The real number was likely higher. In the 1970s alone, the fatality rate hovered from 2 to 3%. 50 deaths, each one a name on a ledger, a family changed forever. The numbers did not capture the agony, venom swelling limbs, tissue turning black, the slow wait for help that might not arrive in time. Clinics kept antivenom on hand, but the medicine's power faded if it warmed even a few degrees above safe storage. Shipments came from Tokyo, traveling by ferry and truck, sometimes delayed by storms that battered the island for days. Nurses like Sachiko Uehara, who worked in Naze Town's health post, remembered cold chain failures that forced doctors to improvise. Once, the only available antivenom had spoiled. The patient survived, but only after weeks of pain and permanent scarring. Field medics told of bite victims carried miles on makeshift stretchers, their breathing ragged, pulse thready, skin already mottled with the first signs of necrosis. A single habu could deliver enough venom to kill a grown man. In the worst years, the island's tiny hospitals ran short of bandages and antibiotics, forced to ration supplies until the next shipment from the mainland. The fear was not abstract. Parents kept children indoors after sunset. Farmers checked rice paddies with sticks, eyes fixed on the tangled grass. Stories of lost neighbors and maimed relatives traveled from village to village, repeated in hushed voices. A single mistake, a hand reaching into a woodpile, a foot slipped in the dark, could change a life forever. The government tracked every case. Annual reports from the Kagoshima Prefectural Health Office listed bite counts, death tolls, and the number of antivenom vials used. In 1977, a warning appeared that the cold storage capacity for habu antivenom was insufficient for peak seasonal demand. The island's isolation magnified every risk. For public health officials, the crisis was relentless. Dr. Masayuki Saito, director of the Prefectural Health Office, pushed for urgent solutions. He wrote that medicine alone could not protect the people. The island's clinics were losing the battle. Every new bite, every new funeral pressed the question, how much longer could Amami-Oshima endure this invisible siege? Desperation colored every decision. The search for a remedy would soon lead officials to consider a different kind of intervention, one that promised safety but would unleash consequences no one could imagine. In the years before the mongoose, Amami-Oshima's forests became a testing ground for quick-fix solutions. The first attempt to control the habu's grip on daily life came in the 1950s, when prefectural administrators approved the release of Japanese weasels. The paperwork moved quickly. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, a senior entomologist, sent his proposal to the Kagoshima Prefecture Health Department in March 1954. Within weeks, Governor Shoichi Narioka signed off, citing the urgent need to protect both crops and ground-nesting birds. 30 weasels, half male and half female, were shipped from Tokyo and released at 3 coastal villages. No environmental impact assessment was required. No public debate was held. The Ministry of Agriculture issued a temporary license, and the weasels were left to fend for themselves. Within a few years, the experiment faded from memory. Local birdwatchers wrote letters to the Nankai Shimbun, warning of risks to native species, but these were dismissed as alarmist. The weasels failed to establish a stable population. Some reports suggest they succumbed to disease, others that they simply dispersed and vanished. By the late 1970s, only scattered descendants remained, their presence barely noted in trapping surveys. No formal mortality logs survive. The number often repeated, 871 weasels lost, appears nowhere in official records. It is a figure born of rumor, not fact. The real lesson was quietly buried. The island's ecosystem resisted simple fixes, and government intervention left little trace but a faint administrative paper trail. Yet the pressure to act did not fade. The habu continued to strike, and each new bite added urgency to the search for a solution. In January 1979, Dr. Masayuki Saito of the Kagoshima Health Office drafted a new proposal. This time, the plan called for a predator with a proven track record against snakes, the small Indian mongoose. The administrative chain moved with even greater speed. The Agriculture and Forestry Department arranged transport from Okinawa, where mongooses had been imported decades earlier. On March 2nd, Governor Masahiro Hoshino signed the release order for 30 mongooses. No environmental impact assessment was conducted. The only paperwork required was a basic risk form which concluded there would be no adverse impact on native fauna. The Ministry of the Environment was notified after the fact. Local newspapers heralded the arrival of the mongoose as a medical breakthrough. Headlines promised protection for children and farmers. Dissenting voices, scientists who warned of the risks to Amami's unique wildlife, were drowned out by the prefecture's public relations campaign. The administrative mindset favored action over caution, and the island's fragile balance was once again placed in the hands of imported predators. The stage was set for a new cycle of unintended consequences, shaped by the same haste and the same hope that a simple solution could end the suffering wrought by the habu. Daylight brought the mongoose into the open. The small Indian mongoose, Herpestis auropunctatus, is a restless hunter, active from sunrise to sunset, darting through undergrowth, nose twitching, eyes alert for any movement. The habu pit viper, the island's original terror, followed a different clock. Coiled and silent by day, the habu only emerged after dusk, gliding through leaf litter while the mongoose retreated to its burrow. The two species, meant to be predator and prey, lived in parallel worlds, barely crossing paths. This single mismatch, a diurnal mongoose and a nocturnal snake, undermined the entire plan. Field ecologists reviewing early trapping logs and stomach content surveys found that mongooses rarely encountered habu in the wild. Instead, the newcomers turned their attention to easier targets. Amami-Oshima, with its dense forests and gentle slopes, teemed with life unfamiliar to the mongoose: ground-nesting birds, flightless Amami rabbits, spiny rats, and endemic frogs. The island's evolutionary isolation had left these species with little defense against a fast, curious carnivore. The initial population, just 30 animals released in March 1979, proved more than enough. With no natural predators and abundant food, the mongooses bred rapidly. Carrying capacity models predicted a slow climb, but the reality far outpaced expectations. By 1999, surveys estimated the population at nearly 10,000. Camera traps, first deployed in the mid-1990s, revealed the scale of the invasion. Mongooses patrolled every habitat from coastal grasslands to upland forests, their range expanding kilometer by kilometer each season. Population growth followed a classic exponential curve. Each female, capable of producing 2 litters per year, raised 4 to 6 pups at a time. Juvenile survival rates soared in the absence of disease or competition. Biologists marked the spread with colored tags and radio collars. The data only confirmed what villagers reported anecdotally. The island was overrun. Livestock feed bins, compost piles, and even open kitchens became foraging grounds. The mongoose, once hailed as a savior, had become a fixture, ubiquitous and unstoppable. The irony deepened as the years passed. Snakebite rates barely budged. In some districts, habu sightings dropped, but not because mongooses were hunting them. Instead, the snakes retreated to steeper, less accessible terrain, while their would-be predators thrived in the lowlands, feasting on eggs, chicks, and small mammals. The original crisis, the fear that drove desperate officials to act, remained unsolved. In its place, a new disaster unfolded, built on a fundamental misunderstanding of animal behavior and ecological balance. Field ecologist Dr. Kenji Takahashi later summarized the lesson in a single line: "You cannot solve a nighttime problem with a daytime answer." The mongoose and the habu, each following its own rhythm, passed each other like ghosts. Meanwhile, the rest of the island's wildlife bore the full weight of the mistake. By the time the scale of the damage was clear, the population curve had already reached its peak, and the island's rarest species were vanishing from the map. The first undeniable sign came from a camera trap hidden near a tangle of roots on the north slope. The footage, time-stamped July 1998, captured a mongoose nosing into a burrow. Seconds later, it dragged out a juvenile Amami rabbit, one of the island's oldest living relics, a species found nowhere else on Earth. The clip circulated among conservation biologists. Each frame was a silent indictment of the choices made 2 decades earlier. Field teams began to catalog the damage. Biologist Dr. Rika Yamamoto, notebook in hand, counted rabbit droppings and burrow entrances along a 2-kilometer transect. In 1990, she had logged an average of 7 active burrows per hectare. By 2002, the number had dropped to less than 2. Population surveys estimated a 71% decline in Amami rabbits across the island's southern forests. The survivors clung to isolated patches of steep terrain, cut off from each other by a sea of predators. The carnage did not stop with mammals. Ground-nesting birds, like the Amami woodcock and Ryukyu robin, began to vanish from lowland forests. Breeding surveys recorded a 68% drop in woodcock nests over a single decade. Biologists searching for eggs found only broken shells and scattered feathers. Camera traps, once set to monitor rare birds, now captured only the flash of mongoose eyes in the dark. The cascade spread downward through the food web. Herpetologist Dr. Kenji Takahashi dissected dozens of mongooses, finding the remains of endemic frogs and lizards in nearly 1 out of every 10 stomachs. Amphibian calling surveys revealed a 54% decline in frog detections between 1995 and 2005. The loss of these insect-eating species had its own consequences. Surveys of koa saplings documented a 34% increase in leaf-chewing beetle damage during the years of peak mongoose abundance. Insect outbreaks stripped young trees bare, slowing forest regeneration and altering the understory. The pattern was unmistakable. Each species lost to predation left a gap that rippled outward, changing the rules for every plant and animal that remained. The Amami spiny rat, once common from coast to ridge, disappeared entirely from trap grids in the southern lowlands. By 2003, Ministry of the Environment maps showed a 57% contraction in the habitat for ground-dwelling vertebrates. The island's unique evolutionary heritage, the product of millions of years of isolation, was being erased in a single human lifetime. Conservation biologists and ecosystem modelers pieced together the evidence, their field notes and survey sheets stacking up in silent testimony. The mongoose, introduced as a solution to one danger, had become a keystone predator, reshaping the entire island. The cost was measured not just in lost species, but in the unraveling of an ecological fabric that had held together for centuries. The question was no longer how to control the habu, but whether anything could be done to halt the collapse before Amami-Oshima's wild heart was lost forever. The campaign to reclaim Amami-Oshima from the mongoose began with a scale that dwarfed anything tried before. 48 specialists, drawn from across Japan, landed on the island with a single mission: to hunt an invisible enemy that moved through every forest, field, and village edge. Their presence marked the shift from local desperation to a coordinated, professional response. The old village bounties, once a lifeline for farmers, had faded as the mongooses grew elusive and trap returns plummeted. Now, the Ministry of the Environment authorized a program with a budget of 2.6 billion yen, nearly $24 million, the largest invasive mammal eradication effort in Japanese history. To track an animal that had learned to avoid humans, the team built a grid of 30,000 live traps, spaced methodically across 75% of the island. Each trap was baited and checked daily, mapped by GPS, and logged in field notebooks. Detection dogs, trained to sniff out mongoose scent, swept abandoned sugarcane fields and limestone thickets where traps failed. The logistics were staggering: hundreds of kilometers of jungle footpaths, thousands of trap nights, and an unbroken relay of supplies from the mainland. Every captured mongoose was tagged, weighed, and removed. As the population shrank, the cost per animal soared, but the calculation was clear. Audits showed that the benefit, restored crops, rebounding wildlife, and avoided medical costs, would reach $1.69 billion over a generation. Each decision was measured against the risk of failure. The field commanders, veterans like Masahiro Nishi, kept morale high even as daily catches dwindled to single digits. The work was slow, methodical, and relentless, but for the first time in decades, the island's future no longer belonged to the invader. April 2018. The final mongoose is trapped, ending a campaign that spanned decades and reshaped the island's future. Masahiro Nishi, a veteran field commander, records the moment in his battered logbook: one adult male captured near a rockfall barrier where traps had gone untouched for weeks. The animal is weighed, tagged, and processed, routine steps, but there is nothing routine about the silence that follows. For the first time in living memory, the forest holds its breath. Nishi's hands tremble as he locks the last cage. He writes a single line: "No more eyes in the grass." For those who spent years tracking footprints through mud and leaf litter, the moment is both relief and uncertainty. The Eradication team gathers at the field station, their faces drawn and quiet. The work is finished, but the story is not. The ministry's protocol is clear: 6 years of monitoring must follow, with 0 detections required before any official declaration. Every quarter, crews return to the grid, checking 30,000 traps, reviewing camera footage, and sending detection dogs through thickets where the scent of mongoose once lingered. Each empty cage is both a victory and a question. The final capture does not bring celebration. Instead, it opens a new chapter of waiting. Nishi and his colleagues know that a single survivor could undo everything. The eradication effort stands on a knife's edge, suspended between hope and the possibility of failure. For now, the only evidence is absence, a gap in the data, a silence where there was once chaos. The island's fate hangs on what the next 6 years will reveal. Eradication brings relief, but not absolution. The ministry's words still echo. Mongoose is not to blame. It was human error, not animal malice, that nearly erased Amami's rarest life. Today, invasive species threaten ecosystems worldwide, and well-intentioned shortcuts often backfire. As science warns, nature rarely offers easy fixes. The lesson endures. True stewardship demands humility, evidence, and the courage to learn from failure. Share your thoughts below.